Hi, I'm Josh Clark, and I am in beautiful Berlin for iOS DevCon, enjoying not only the city, but a whole lot of really smart and enthusiastic developers and designers, where we're talking about developing for iOS. That's something that I do for a living. I'm a designer and mobile strategist, specializing in all things mobile, really. I'm based in New York, and I wrote a book called Tapworthy, Designing Great iPhone Apps. But what I'm really excited about is that I'm here with Tom, who I've agreed to provide him with some answers if he'll give me some questions. So Tom, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I know this game. It's called Jeopardy, isn't it?
It is, that's right. You are in jeopardy.
Yeah. So Josh, you talked about designing the invisible, so the touch Jesus. So can you tell us something about it?
Yeah. So we're in this really interesting new phase of interaction design, which is brought on by the touchscreen. And the fact that we now have the possibility to create the illusion of direct interaction with content means that we can design with gestures, being able to actually sort of move and shift things around with our fingers, sometimes multiple fingers at once. But the trick is, as we move into that realm of gestural design, is that gestures are invisible. They don't have labels like buttons and tabs and menus and everything that we're used to on the desktop. And there are good reasons to move away from those desktop conventions. A lot of those things just don't work very well on touch screens. So the question is, how do we help people find all these controls, all these clever gestures when they're invisible? And a lot of times right now, we just leave them invisible, unfortunately, which means that they're sort of like Easter eggs, surprises that you find almost by accident. So if you have some shortcut, for example, a lot of newspapers let you fast forward to a new section with a 2-finger swipe. But why would you try that? You don't know it. And so actually, I think that we're making a big mistake by leaving these invisible, that we need to have some sort of subtle cue or coaching and sort of something visual that give a hint that something is available. And I think that a lot of things that we can do is learn from game design. Games are fantastic at this, at teaching as you go. With a lot of games, I'm talking about video games here, you don't even know what your goal is, let alone what your capabilities or the obstacles you might encounter. And the games don't give you complicated instructions. Instead, they teach you as you go. And that's something that I think interaction designers who don't design games can do a lot to actually study. So my work recommendation for all interaction designers out there is to start playing more games and watching how they learn. So that's my training advice for designers right now.
So that sounds great. Despite the video games, what are the best examples for these gestures?
Yeah. I think that unfortunately there aren't a lot of great examples for teaching this stuff in regular apps, but you do see some sort of hints. And again, it goes to often sort of more playful examples and often children's games. There's a wonderful app called, and I'm going to mess it up, I think it's The Fantastic Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore, I think. And it's this children's app that accompanies an animated movie for kids. And so it's this animated storybook. And it's all about gestures and sort of playful exploration of the interface. But throughout, there are sort of all these gentle cues for how to do it, sometimes with time. It's like if you wait on a screen for 20 or 30 seconds and they can't, that might mean that the child reading it hasn't figured out how to continue. And so that's when they sort of create a little animation, a little hint, here's how you do it. Try swiping here, continue now. And that's something that I think in a lot of software, games do this very often. They'll sort of take cues and observe how the user is doing, how long they spend at places, and then give some hints. And that's something that we should incorporate into other software too. Wow, they've been looking at this screen for 20 seconds after constant motion. Maybe they need some help, and that's a good time to introduce some coaching.
And so this is why toddlers are the best beta testers for your software?
That's right. I often say that toddlers, the really young kids, and I'm talking about like 3-year-olds, are actually fantastic at figuring out gestural interfaces. If you've seen a toddler play with an iPad, you know what I'm talking about. They get it immediately. Sometimes these kids can't even talk yet, but they know how to use an iPad. And so, I think my advice to interaction designers is follow the toddlers. As you start to create these physical interfaces that require touch and that have sort of the physicality of real objects that you can move and squeeze and pinch, think about would a toddler get this? Because they're better at this than we are. They haven't been poisoned by 30 years of desktop interaction design. I think that, sorry you guys, is this all right? Is the sound okay? Yeah. Is that okay? All right. So let me pick up. So they haven't been poisoned by 30 years of desktop interaction design. And so in a lot of ways, we can sort of think of them as real pure tests of how well do these physical interfaces work, because that's how they're experiencing them, is sort of these natural interfaces. And so I'm serious about this. As you mentioned, I think that anybody who's designing touchscreen interfaces should get a toddler to be their beta tester. Find a 3-year-old and give her your app and see how well she figures it out. She might not know what your app does, but if you've made the controls right, they'll be able to figure those out. And so as you start to add this physicality to your apps, think, how would a toddler think about this? Would they understand how to use this control and this mechanism? I think it's a great way to go.
Well, it's interesting. It's a very interesting point of view, and you're so intense or enthusiastic. It's, well, impressive. Okay, but you mentioned animations. So which role does they play?
I mentioned that a little bit earlier, talking about the More is Less More app. It's showing these sort of gentle hints. But the way that our brains and vision work is that we're attracted to motion. And so sometimes a way to give a gentle cue without making people read instructions is to animate an element and to show, to suggest, hey, this thing's moving, maybe I can move it too. It creates curiosity and triggers exploration. And we sort of, we like to explore when we're guided through that exploration. We don't like to be lost, but we like to explore. And so if we can help people explore by giving them trail markers through animation and things like this, then I think that's a great way to teach an interface. So an example of that, there's a newspaper app in the U.S. called USA Today, one of the biggest circulation newspapers, and they had this dial sort of at the top that you would flip through to change the main sections. And what they found is, because not all of them were there, people didn't necessarily understand that you could move this control, this non-standard iOS control. And so so people weren't actually finding ways to a lot of the content of the app. And they just added this simple animation every time you visit the screen so that the dial slides in real fast. And it just triggers this association. Hey, this moves. Maybe I can move it. And they saw this big jump in people suddenly figuring out how to use this primary control. So a lot of times, the coaching doesn't have to be a text tip. A lot of times you don't have to make people read at all. If you can just draw their attention to something through demonstration and then encourage them to do it, that people will follow through.
Great, thank you. It was a pleasure for me to be interviewed by you, and I hope you are going to enjoy your time here in Berlin.
Well, me too. And so I think Tom and I are going to go and have some fun with some of the other geeks, nerds, and designers here at iOS DevCon. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.